Okay, if we look at the agenda, there are no action items, so we have discussion items. There is no public comment at this meeting. This is a meeting between commissioners to discuss the issues involved with annexation to the city of Shelton. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to
Well, let's start with
Commissioner Buck.
Wendy. I think she's got an introduction that's
Okay.
worked out, but yeah.
All right, you're going to be the
Yep,
facilitator.
I'll be the facilitator
Yes.
today.
So I just wanted to, for the commission and the public, just kind of provide a little bit of history. This is not a new issue for this port, maybe a little bit for this commission, but it's been talked about at least since 2005, starting with a letter from Dave O'Leary, at the time the city manager, talking about providing city services and utilities to off of city property, and that may not be in the best interest of the city without annexation. So that was kind of the beginning back in the time that we have calculated. That pushed annexation decision. They were trying to push for a decision by October 2005. And then in late 2005, 2006, there was an MOU drafted, never adopted. Process included joint meetings, presentations, letters, numerous meetings among port and city staff. 2017, a new manager came on, Ryan Wheaton. He visited me in my office, talked about the latecomers fees to the city's water, which we now know are gone. But at the time, the port's portion of that looked to be about $1.3 million. And I was told if the port chose to annex, that all or some of that might be dismissed. He wanted a decision the next week on that. So again, to which I said, this is not a small, light decision. And then we've gotten several lists from the city even back then in 2017 of bullets of benefits they saw to annexation. And then 2019, the mayor at the time, Bob Rogers, and Jeff Knighton, city manager, met with chairman and I, and again discussed the possibility of annexation and the probability of it. And then 2022, various meetings with city staff and port staff have brought again some questions about potential annexation. And then, as you know, 2023 is here, and we just met with the city, and now we're here to discuss. So that's really all I had right now. I have further information if we need, but I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Buck, who's asked to facilitate, and I'm going to write down items as they come up.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is a selfish reason why I asked to do this. In my brain, I need to do a pro and con analysis from all of the stakeholders of it. And so this was either something I was going to do at home or in my office, or somehow to see it all visually. So for our first of what I think is probably going to be many discussions about this, I mean, I have no idea that this is thoughts that this isn't going to take us a lot of discussion and a lot of transparency.
Absolutely.
And a lot of talking to all of these people. So in my mind, the start was just who are the entities, and maybe I missed somebody for right now, and we can add another plate. But I wanted to talk through the thoughts from each of those perspectives. What are the pros and cons to each of those people, so that I can kind of see all of the sides of it, and also to try to uncover the unintended consequences, the things that we didn't think about will be part of the thought process too. So I kind of wanted to start with the county, was what was in my mind, was thinking about. And so the first thing that came to my mind was that the con to them is they're going to lose 1,100 acres out of their size. So maybe just a loss of acres or whatever. And then the city, that's probably a pro to them, is they're going to grow. The county would lose the acreage and the city would grow. And then, the county other thoughts to me were, from their perspective, is they get right now permit fees when when somebody does a building permit, right? And so that's going to be a thought to them too, yeah, and a pro to the city, that there'll be permit fees that the city's going to get. And probably one of my questions was, what are the differences in those? I mean, it'd be interesting to re-permit the new Squirrel building through city stuff and see what their permits would have costed, because that might be a question for me over here is what's the difference? So my question one, maybe what's the difference, that's all right, what's the difference in, you'll get my thought process here, but as we go along, what's the difference in permit fees between the city and the county?
And utilities.
Yes, right,
Oh, of course.
right,
Because it could go on either side of the tenants, the pros and cons on utilities.
for sure, yeah, that's a definite, question.
What are the differences between the regulations for permits
Right,
between the county and city?
right,
There'll be a difference.
for sure.
And
Well, maybe that's a question, yeah, and utility fees too, yeah. Regulations for sure are a difference.
So plus
And
regulations.
fees,
plus
yep,
utility
utilities,
fees.
yep. So right now, the county doesn't get any utilities from us, right? Because we provide septic systems and water, and they already get garbage from Mason County Garbage.
we get more garbage from Mason County Garbage.
Yeah, so if we went into the city, what are the different fees that, so we can put on the city hat for a minute and say, the pros are gonna be, B&O tax is gonna be something that the city's gonna get from us. And then you can also put that on the tenant, on the cons side for them. Obviously, that's is B&O tax. We don't currently pay property taxes because they're, so that's moot, doesn't really make any
No,
difference.
but LET.
Oh, LET,
Tenants
that was the
pay
other
LET,
one.
So the city will now get.
City will get the LET tax and the county will have
will lose
a
it.
con to that. Hmm?
Yeah, the county will lose it.
Yep, and the county will lose it. Okay, so what else from the county? Was there any pros to the county for them losing this acreage? I guess
Well, the sheriff doesn't have to provide.
sheriff doesn't have to provide service. Yeah,
Right.
so you can put that on the county pro side.
Of course, he's
What
still
about-
will respond if anything happens, I mean.
Yeah,
Just what
and
happens.
fire, that doesn't really change, right? Because we
Well, we can
currently,
discuss that in a minute. It
Okay.
is gonna change.
okay. What other pros would the county have to not having us, not having us in there?
Roads.
Yeah,
We
they
do all
don't-
our own roads.
We do all our
So-
roads, so that's not, yeah,
We do have one county road at Johns Prairie, which is Capitol Hill Road that they maintain.
right,
But we're not discussing.
Yeah, this is only-
John's Spur, it's
yeah.
only Sanderson Field.
right,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, I want to clarify that this, we're only talking about this area.
Yeah.
The city has not approached us, so to speak, about John's Prairie
Right.
at all.
Right,
They have not.
And we're not contiguous up there.
yeah.
Right.
But we are here, right?
We are here.
The border is down, is there, okay, cool.
We,
Cool, cool.
we will be contiguous, won't we?
Maybe.
Once the annexation of Peacock Hill is done
Mm,
and
mm,
our sale.
Yeah,
true.
that's true.
True for out there. Okay, so maybe let's shift over to another one of the things. So let's talk about the tenants for a minute. What are the other pros and cons that might come for a tenant? Their LET charges won't change. They already get garbage from Mason County
They
Garbage.
do, but I think
But
there's
rates-
another
Garbage will be
layer.
mandatory
Okay,
for
for the city, that's true. So you
Yeah,
can put
there's
that-
another
And is
tax
the rate
layer, I
different?
think.
Okay.
He sent us the link to Mason County Garbage, Jeff Knighton did,
Okay.
but it was to commercial. And when you click around, you see there's also city, and it says this does not include city fees and taxes. So I think
Yeah.
there's another, I don't have a city bill, but.
Yeah, the tenants,
So,
so the, higher garbage rate?
Well, we don't know that they're higher, but they are mandatory.
And mandatory, yeah. Yeah, that link definitely did say these charges that, well, yeah, true, we don't know
Yeah.
if they, and then, and mandatory garbage, I don't know if that's a big con, but it might be. I don't know if anybody right now hauls theirs own to somebody somewhere
Yeah, I
else.
don't either.
Because you're right, in the city, you have to have it, mandatory
Well, you pay for it
garbage.
whether you.
You pay for it whether you need it or not, yep, exactly.
And recycling.
mhm.
And recycle, oh, that's right, it's mandatory too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that might be something to, just to throw up there, as recycling is mandatory in the city.
Sewer fees, potentially.
Yeah, what,
Eventually,
right?
Okay.
So what do they do now? I mean, they're on septics, but what, do they pay anything other than their water usage?
Just for, so they pay, I mean, we do the permitting.
Yeah, the tenants are responsible for maintaining and pumping and having their systems inspected, you know, on a kind of a variable length of time between 3 and 5 years, depending on usage. So there's costs associated with that.
Right.
but one of the points Jeff Knighton made was this is all about economic development, and it seems to me that they want the sewer rates here to offset the residential sewer rates.
Mhm.
So it would seem to me that they are planning to put sewers in at some point.
So a con then to the tenants, I guess, would be,
Or a pro.
or a pro,
Would be
yeah.
They don't have to pay O&M inspection costs.
Right.
But
The
they'd be
con would
paying
be
se- yeah,
some kind of
fees
sewer.
would-
Right, we
yeah.
don't know, so maybe that even goes on our question board too, is the difference between, you know, sewer, yeah,
Eventual, that would not be
Right.
immediate.
yeah, the O&M costs would go away, would disappear. That could be a pro. I was just thinking through, response, would a city cop respond faster than a county
We can
cop?
talk, yeah, we can talk about
You know,
that.
I
Yeah.
think I don't know if that might be a pro, is quicker response time, but I don't know.
Well, I
if
mean,
it would
that's
be.
one of the,
Yeah.
that's one of the issues that Jeff brought forward, there was a quicker police response time than the sheriff,
Yeah,
and with more officers.
right. So maybe we can put that as a pro, with a question mark behind it, of quicker.
tenants.
Yeah, pro
Both
for
for
tenants.
us and the tenants.
Yeah, and even and for the port, maybe you could probably add that on, quicker response time,
That's on police. Now on fire.
right?
Currently, we're under District 11.
11 at Island Lake.
At Island Lake, much smaller fire department than this. The city is under District 5.
Yeah,
And as you know, currently, there's a issue or a proposal going forward to the voters in April to join 11 and 5.
Mhm.
I don't know if it'll pass or not. If
Yeah.
it does,
we become part of.
our
5.
fire protection
We
becomes
would-
part of
We'd be
5.
absorbed by
We'd be
fire.
absorbed by 5, yeah.
The fire protection, and I talked to both chiefs.
Yeah,
They don't foresee any change in services to us.
right, good.
In fact,
Well, except that,
I'm just
Sorry.
saying, that
Okay.
what they told me was, they don't perceive any change in services in the fire department to us. What changes is for them, is it's economically better for them to combine for various reasons, combination of services where they contract out maintenance that District 11 does,
Right.
that sort of thing. And it's a but that's all on their part, that's not us
Mhm.
at all. But potentially, the service should not change
Shouldn't, yeah, that's,
from both chiefs.
right, okay.
They did indicate that there would be 2 full-time
Yeah.
staff 24/7, which they don't have now.
They don't
11
have
is
now, but-
mostly volunteers
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, they only have 2 paid employees.
Hmm. So, yeah, you got quicker response time for police and fire, fire, yeah.
Fire's
shouldn't-
not
it shouldn't
changed.
move. Yeah, it shouldn't change.
Should be limited except if that goes through, then, like Brandon said.
But that doesn't change
the vote.
anything.
Well, 2 full-time fire 24/7 rather than 2 full-time employees that just work days.
But-
So that's the difference.
But that's gonna happen whether we annex or not.
Yeah.
That has
I mean,
nothing-
Or
if it
vote,
passes
yeah.
the levy, it's
Yeah,
gonna
that's kind of
happen.
outside of, so,
But that was one of Jeff's arguments in the discussion, was fire protection.
right,
Would be increased, and it's not.
right.
So the tenants, would it be a pro to say they could hook to sewer? I mean, that's,
They can do that now, actually. In fact,
Right.
Squirrel has already done that
Okay.
without annexation being a requirement. So
Okay.
we sort of already have sewer
Okay.
access. One benefit I want to mention of sewer here at the airport is that it reduces how much land we have to use for, drain fields and whatnot. So
Yeah, so
that is
maybe
a
that's
benefit, but that, like I say, that can happen without annexation. It
Yeah,
already
right,
has.
so
And
true that.
We're also, we have a proposal right now to actually extend the city sewer main to pick up some buildings near 130 Corporate Road, which is those two buildings the port recently purchased. So we're working right now. We're just gonna actually a kickoff meeting next week with the SCJ Alliance, our engineering firm that we're gonna work with on that, so.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
What about, let's talk a minute about water.
So,
Or,
so
go ahead.
let's stop there
Yep.
for a second, just because, I mean, I could write that connecting to sewer, but I don't think that's determined by annexation at this point,
Right, doesn't sound like it.
so,
Doesn't
okay,
sound-
so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna write it.
Yeah.
Just- Okay.
And then let's talk about water for a minute, for the tenants, because we've got, I think, pros and cons both. Because like we said, some tenants might not want city water, and so they like their water system at the port. So that's kind of a pro maybe that they can hook to it to get fire flow. So is there issue with fire flow? Can we provide everybody the fire flow they need?
Yeah, we did a
Yeah.
great job at our big fire.
Yeah, no doubt, good point.
We have excellent fire flow. So we have a 550,000 gallon reservoir up on the ridge by the inactive runway, as well as a 125,000 gallon reservoir, and then miles of ductile iron water mains. And so there's quite a lot of storage. One thing that we don't have is perfected senior water rights, so that have been adjudicated. So our water right, we do have a senior water right because the feds were here prior to the 1945 date that was established for that. However, we haven't perfected that through the court system, and there's, the state is not perfecting water rights at any sort of rapid pace, let's just say. So
Do we even have an application in?
we do. We have an
Okay.
application. That's, I think
What
it's-
does perfecting water rights mean to the common person?
It basically guarantees that you have a right to groundwater withdrawals up to a certain quantity in terms of acre feet per year. So I guess for our current tenants and for certainly additional tenants that could come on, assuming they're just going to use typical domestic type flows, meaning, a sink, toilets, things like that, as opposed to an industrial user that needs lots and lots of water, we could continue to provide plenty of water for many years to come, assuming we don't have a tenant that needs large quantities. If a potential tenant were interested in siting here and they needed incredibly large amounts of water beyond what our non-perfected water rights would allow, at that point we would need the city to provide that additional water. So that is a long-term benefit to the port at some point, is more water availability.
I think we should address that on there too as a pro
Yeah.
of
The only thing I'm
future-
thinking of is we had a project recently, Project Alfred, and they were looking to be that larger water user. In their phase one, we could accommodate. When they got to 2, 3, and 4, we wouldn't be able to, but we had discussions, and the city was involved in this, that the city would step in at that point. So does annexation, again, kind of like the sewer, does annexation have to occur for this, or?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question, maybe that's a
Right.
question.
Right, maybe that's a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it might be a pro.
It also could be a pro, I think, to tenants and the port for future larger water
Well,
capacity.
One of the things at the Friday meeting, though, was the type of water that we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
as opposed to city water.
Right.
And tenants that want well water.
Yeah, the city's water is chlorinated. Port water is not.
Mhm.
That's
I think that's definitely something we should capture too. Yeah. Yeah, and then let's put it as a pro and, a pro for the tenants, a future capacity water, it could be bigger, whatever. Water capacity.
And then water quality.
Right, Right,
Water treatment, maybe?
water treatment,
Well,
yeah.
treatment, because quality is,
Yeah, that's good, both
Yeah.
ways, but water treatment, some of our
Chlorine.
tenants don't want chlorinated water.
Right, so put
How
that,
about
yeah.
well versus city?
Yeah, that's good too.
Another thing that the port has done regarding water that benefits our tenants is to encourage economic development, such as the recent hangars that were constructed, so 2 of them on the north end of the apron, as well as the squirrel hangar. The port spent the money to extend a water main to facilitate that development, and we provided a hydrant at each location, free of charge. Essentially, it was a port contribution to help facilitate a project, basically. Whereas the city would, of course, charge for that. We elected not to.
And how many are those hydrants placed so that future buildings would be served by them?
Yeah, typically. So the hydrant we placed on the north end of Tarmac was kind of centered between the 2 hangars, essentially, so it serves both. And the squirrel hangar, there's room for another hangar behind Squirrel's recently constructed hangar, and that hydrant would also serve that site as well.
And hangars
So-
seem to be the business of the day.
Yeah, we've had a lot of demand for that lately, so there's more on the horizon.
Okay, so maybe that's a tenant pro, how do we capture that?
Or would it be a con?
It would have been a cost to them, but a pro that they got it from the port, but a con would be a cost from the
but who's
city.
to say that they were gonna do it again for another hookup?
Yeah, we don't guarantee that we will do that, but that's been what
Right.
we've been doing in the past recently.
Yeah,
It's
think
at
through
the
that.
commission's
Right.
option,
Yeah.
of course.
So the way I'm looking at this, and let me make sure I'm, is if the port were to annex into the city, and then be then we're looking at the con.
The con would
right?
be,
So-
right.
So the pro may have happened now, but the
Right,
con.
we might not want to
Right.
put it as a pro, yeah, because it might not happen again in the
Yeah.
future. But, a con, I mean, it kind of rolls in with all of the regulations and fees that were.
And they would, I mean, had we been annexed at this point, Squirrel would have paid the city to
Right.
put that in.
Right.
maybe. So I think it's a con.
Yeah, I do
And
too.
then the city, it's a pro.
Yeah, yep. So
Let's see
development
where
fees
it's
or,
Fire,
Goodwill.
hydrant fee?
hydrant fee, yeah, right. They gain hydrant fees, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fees in my mind that would be paid for development that are different between the city and the county, like stormwater too, regulations, yeah, and fees for stormwater.
Yeah.
If we want to capture some of that stuff in there as they grow.
Yeah, the city has stormwater fees. I'm not very familiar with what those look like, but the port, we maintain all of our own stormwater treatment on site and
Yeah.
infiltration as well of treated stormwater. And so there could be stormwater fees for all of our tenants if we
I
were
live in the
annexed.
city and the stormwater fees are pretty healthy.
Right. So maybe we need to put that as a, port con too,
Yeah.
stormwater fees and regulations.
Well, the regs are gonna be, they're not, they're all pretty much the same for stormwater regulations.
In the city and the county?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's all coming down from the Ecology Stormwater Manual
okay.
for Western Washington.
So, but the
everyone-
fees are there, certainly.
Yeah.
That's.
okay. Yeah, that's a question for sure. So it could be a,
And that's a biggie for the city.
Right.
That's what they're looking for. I got the impression is.
they're looking for those stormwater water fees.
It-
Let's see, we talked about permitting processes. So I don't know if it's kind of more of a question, but it might be, I don't know. I don't actually know whether city and county, right now where they're at with permitting. Does anybody have a sense for that? Is that a pro or a con that the city?
Well,
might be-
back when we owned the Oakland Bay Marina, I have some familiarity with the differences in permitting
Yeah.
between the two there. And And actually, before we sold the marina, we went through the annexation process after we moved the UGA line back out to the outer harbor line, and it took us about 2 years to go through that.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
eventually, we were able to annex, the portion of the marina that was stuck out in the county into the city. So we have recently been through an annexation process, but the regulations there are very different than on-land regulations, certainly.
Well,
So.
and that issue was pretty cut and dried. I mean, it was just obviously, a line had been drawn and it cut right through the middle of the boathouses.
Boathouse, right.
My boathouse. And, I mean, it was something that really didn't have that much effect on the city or the county. It was just making
Yeah.
sense of, and yet it took 2 years.
Right, to do it.
But the
Yeah.
regulations between the city and the county down there were very different. For instance, the county required, we found out kind of late, the county required building permits for boathouses, boathouse construction, repair, et cetera. The city did not. The city required structural engineering for pile driving and things, and essentially to make sure that there's enough embedment of the piles to support the structures and so forth. And the county, anyway, they had completely different approaches to how they permitted down there. I think they would be a lot more similar to one another here at Sanderson Field. But
You think this county would be, or the city would be more similar to?
the county and the city regulations on land here at the
Oh,
airport would be
okay.
a lot more similar than they were in the water of the marina. Oh,
Well, we've been working for 3.5 years on permits. The city was not, they were not cooperative. And they supported the marina in every possible way, but it still took a long time. They like to say, well, we can permit a house in 45 days or whatever it is, but I think if you're outside the lines
Right.
of a house on a lot in the city, it takes a while.
Right. So maybe that goes on our question spot, is permitting timelines and.
Permit fees and process maybe.
Yeah, definitely process. Can it also take longer, shorter, easier, harder? We just don't know.
Yeah.
And that's big to me,
Yeah.
because I think early on they talked about, city talked about them being more streamlined and
Yeah.
you should get a quicker response from us.
Right.
And I don't, how do we know that that's true? Yeah.
We don't.
I don't know either.
another big issue is, curbs, gutters, and sidewalks, and whether that would be
Yes.
imposed upon the port
Right.
if we were to be annexed.
So I think that is a port con,
Yeah.
not, tenants, but it would be on us,
It'd be a
not our
tenant-
tenants,
It could be a tenant
Yeah,
con as
right.
well, because it would cost the tenant more to develop.
right?
If Squirrel had been required to put a bunch of,
Yeah.
sidewalks and curbs and gutters and things like that.
But they weren't.
They weren't, but, they might have been if
Oh,
we
because
were in the
yeah,
city.
they weren't because
Not
we're in
in
the
the
county.
city.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well-
I put it for both.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, the way it is right now for the regulations concerning that, land use regulations, in the county's comprehensive plan is specifically talks to the port's plan for, scheme for harbor improvement.
Yeah.
For our comprehensive plan, that regulations, land use regulations in the county, referring to the port, defer to the port's regulations.
Right,
We would need to see that with the city,
good point.
to see that, because ours, we have different,
Yeah,
as we know, different processes,
different
different
missions,
needs,
yeah,
different missions.
right.
So that's
a
something
question.
that we need to have, make sure that the land use regulations are defined such as they are with the county.
Right.
And defer to
Right.
our regulations in our
Right.
comprehensive.
Would the city, refer to, or defer, to our scheme? Our comp
scheme,
plan.
Comprehensive scheme of
Our comp
harbor
plan.
improvements.
Exactly. The other thing I was thinking about too, because from looking at history, it looks like one of the big stumbling blocks back in '05 was the UGA change. And so the city, when if they would have annexed, their UGA whole numbers all change. And so it made growth management problems for them for compliance, because all of a sudden, they gained, stuff that hurt them. And so I think there's something I was gonna put on that too, versus city county, that it's gonna change their UGA and growth management requirements. And so.
Maybe it's a question more than.
It might be a question more than that, yeah, because it appeared that was a big discussion point back then, was, now the city was saying if we bring in 1,000 acres, that used to be in our UGA, now our UGA equation changes a lot. And so where are we gonna bump out our size to meet with growth management? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a big question for them. And then how would that, I guess it's the city's UGA, isn't it? It's not really the county's UGA, it's the city's.
Right, it's the cities.
Okay, so it's could potentially be a con for the city, is it'll mess up their UGA/GMA equations.
You want me to put that?
Yeah, I think we should. We talked about grandfathered in. Equations? No, you got it.
Okay.
We talked about buildings being grandfathered in, and, for their, so that might still be on our question pile, is what about our existing stuff? How do we address all that?
Sounded like the answer a couple Fridays ago.
Yeah.
Quick answer was they'd all be grandfathered in until such time as the tenant changes.
Oh.
Isn't that what you remember?
Yeah, that's
The
what I remember.
tenant, so a
Right.
change in tenant is kind of a big deal for, if you go from a greens company to a dynamite storage
Right.
facility or something.
Right.
Obviously, people need to know.
That would be a major issue for us because we have a lot of tenant
Tenant
turnover in
changes,
various
yeah.
buildings. If every time we had a tenant change in a building, we had to bring that building up to current
Right?
today building code,
So, yeah, that's a
it'd be
big
a massive hit
Con for us,
financially
yeah.
for us.
Is change in use or change in tenant could require.
All the stuff that
Yeah,
Ranch Creek
city
Farm
rent.
did, we'd have paid for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. We already did B&O tax, right? The city would
Yeah.
get it. LET doesn't change, but it's a pro to that. We got con for LET there. What about zoning? What zoning stuff for what they've got and
Yeah.
what we are under current, is there gonna be issues with, I'm just thinking about the city, how much zoning talk about do they have for industrial stuff and for,
Once again, that's
what are their.
referring to our comprehensive plan.
Yeah, right,
Or to our scheme.
Well, and what they want is the industrial. They're not gonna change this property because they want the
Right.
industrial/commercial
Right.
to help with their sewer rates. And
so,
And the entire airport virtually is zoned airport industrial currently.
Okay.
But I don't know if the city has that as a
right, do they
designation.
have that as a
I don't
designation?
think they do.
Yeah.
And they can take it up with the FAA.
Right. Oh, there's another good question too, yeah.
Both the city and the county have adopted the airport overlay zone ordinance, and that was
Okay.
done in 2005, 2006.
Okay.
So, and those
So they're already-
regulations are identical, so
Oh, good.
that would be seamless at least.
Great. That would be a big, let's see, we talked about
So would
sales tax, oh yeah. go ahead, Cindy.
increase industrial, commercial property.
Oh, yeah, that's a big, huge, it's gonna increase their, industrial
Commercial.
and commercial property, yeah. Which was another stated reason by them to want to do it, is to have a greater, what they called economic development opportunity. And so that was I don't know that that's a con to the city, or the county. Might be that they lose, lots of acres plus development opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and the city's UGA extends to the west of us, and because annexation has to be contiguous, in order for them to bring that, that acreage into the city limits, Sanderson Field would have to be annexed first, and that's kind of why this issue is being talked about right now.
I thought that you could annex non-contiguous now.
Well, I have the MRSC, we could look at it.
The definitions on contiguous and non-contiguous have changed over the years.
Yeah.
So contiguous used to be abutting, and now they've relaxed that, and so it would have to be a near proximity typically. So they are now looking at those definitions a little bit differently. Contiguous does not necessarily mean abutting and connected, as long as they can find some nexus. So yeah,
Okay.
that definition is in flux and has been for a number of years.
Okay.
The other thing, just so that you're aware of, is there is a statute that each city and county must provide for, under statute, essential public facilities. And the airport is essential public facilities. So all those comprehensive plans that your chairman's been talking about must include that information as well. And that's a baseline for you because you run an airport.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So just having brought out the MRSC, I have marked assumption of indebtedness. The annexation statutes authorize the city council to require property in an area being annexed to assume, as a condition of annexation, a pro rata share of the annexing city's then outstanding indebtedness that had been approved by the voters, contracted, or incurred prior to or existing at the date of annexation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'd be
That's
a-
huge. Yeah. Assumption of debt.
Well, yeah, Jeff talked, and one of the questions at our meeting on Friday, last Friday, a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, was the sewer indebtedness that we have right now, or that the city has right now.
Exactly.
And the answer is the ratepayers are paying for that, and that would not be included in whatever we're talking about now. That was the answer that I heard.
Well, and didn't we, somebody asked if we could get free something. We asked for a different.
Reduced rates,
reduced
yeah,
rate, or
right.
could we go on a hook? And they said no because of that, because of what they already owe.
Right.
And it wouldn't be fair.
Mhm.
But it's on the current ratepayers.
Yeah.
And it can't, and somebody else wouldn't have to assume portion of that debt, is what I got from that.
Yeah, but as we connect to the sewer, then,
Our-
you would become a ratepayer, and then
We
you'd be
become
yes. then paying that as well. So it's
And we
essentially
would
just a
want-
higher rate to cover their past expenses.
And we would want to be sure that it doesn't get included as a common part of the statute, that we would assume that indebtedness.
Yeah,
We'd
I mean, that looks-
want it excluded from an annexation.
Yeah, the
agreement.
question is, would annexation alone, and maybe not hookups, but just the annexation itself, would that cause this? Or is it just once you hook up to services?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This says it's kind of a standard part of an annexation
Yeah.
agreement, so we would want to be sure that there's a clear understanding in writing.
Yeah.
Right. Right, so maybe that goes on our question.
It's a
When
question,
was
but I
that?
think it's also.
And it would be a
Assumption of
con
debt,
for
yeah.
the tenants,
Right,
because they're going to be the ratepayers,
Yeah.
essentially.
yeah. Careful, that little easel is a little bit,
Yeah, I'm gonna tear it off.
yeah, it's a little bit shaky.
Yeah. Maybe it's better to tear it first.
So we were also talking about, so let's put on our port hat for a minute and talk about, street maintenance and chip sealing and snow plowing and all that stuff that they were talking about.
Hey, Ned happens to be in the room.
Ned's in the
He
room,
might have some words on that.
right?
Our number one guy.
Right?
So we do our own road maintenance, repairs,
Right.
plowing.
Yeah.
And this is priority for us to
Yeah.
plow, where we heard the comment at the city that we are not arterial, and so we would be well down the list.
But our plowing is for the runway.
It's
It's
all.
everything.
It's the roads.
To get to
We plow for
everything. Yeah.
business too.
Yeah,
But yeah, we make the runway a priority
But the
for
runway
life flight.
is the priority,
yeah.
not the streets, the runway is the
And I tried to
The
bring Logan
streets are
out.
kind of a priority too, because we like making sure our tenants can get in.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I tried to bring Logan out to drive in the snow. There was no snow on our roads.
We'll find a city. road.
That's awesome.
All off
So
the
how
Way
did
to
side.
do your job.
Yeah, yes. How do we capture that with, I mean, if they're city streets, will they
So, I mean,
tell
I
us we
think
can't? I don't know.
they don't,
Well, we already have the capability,
Sure.
and we do it.
yeah.
So just because we annex, does that mean that we get rid of our snowplows?
That's what we're asking.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, annexation wouldn't, doesn't mean necessarily that you are granting a right-of-way to all of the streets to the city. So they wouldn't necessarily become city streets. That would be something that would be negotiable, I think. You can be in city limits and still have private roads, right?
yeah.
And they
I think,
prioritize roads for plowing.
They're looking to, I mean, that was the comment at the meeting, was that they would put our streets on their street maintenance plan.
Right.
And assess them.
So they're proposing they become city streets, in
Right.
other words.
Yeah, I mean, they were, that's what
But
he
that
was
doesn't
talking
mean they
about.
get plowed.
He thought that would be a pro for us, that they would take over our street maintenance and plowing and, you know, that kind of stuff, and yeah.
I'm not so sure that's,
I'm not so sure that's a pro either, but I don't, yeah.
Ned doesn't think that.
Yeah, I mean, because we
Yeah.
got, you know, guys that do that right here.
Yeah.
And in the past, they had, talked about that, and that there might be a reduction of, you know, those needs for us, but I don't see how that would go away.
Well, and let's follow it through. This is just me thinking out loud. Suppose they do take over the street maintenance and the plowing and the mowing. And are we gonna have to lay people off?
Yeah, or do our guys go start working for the city? then,
Right.
you know? The mowing alone is about 7 months. My guys are full-time mowers.
Yeah,
And the city mows their property now.
yeah.
Of course, it's not
what's-
privately owned.
no, yeah, what's they're mowing parks and
Yeah.
Yeah, their mowers,
Strips.
they don't have 15-foot wide mower decks behind giant tractors like we do here.
Right,
It's a little different.
I'm not giving up my people.
Yeah.
right. In the
Put that
past,
on
they did
paper.
talk about, that was part of one of the discussions, they said they would,
Yeah.
would absorb any employees
Yeah.
in the city. They would have jobs in the city, but,
You guys want to work for the city?
yeah. So how do we capture that? I mean, we put that on there as cons of, like, possibly
Street.
lower priority for street maintenance and, right, I mean, we mow for, I mean, just to keep everything from growing crazy, right? But also,
We have certain standards.
yeah,
too,
just
Christie,
get, okay, tell me about
That we
that.
have to meet out on the airport as well as, you know, in our plan around here too.
Yeah.
You know, you can only let it get so tall out on the airport before it starts causing problems.
Yep.
And that kind of thing. So, you know, it has to meet a certain standard.
Right,
The city also has no experience working with our endangered species bird, the straight-torn lark, that nests here at the airport.
good point,
which we
that's a
have
great
to
one. Yeah, maintenance, mowing.
Take into account when mowing and doing projects.
Yeah,
Another thing about stormwater, you know, we have to manage our stormwater in the vicinity of the airport very different than you would manage stormwater typically, and that is because we don't want ponds of standing water that act as wildlife attractants.
Right.
Which, you know, is obviously incompatible with safety at an airport, as an example. So we kind of follow, the state of Washington has WSDOT Aviation Division has a stormwater manual for airports that's
Mhm.
very specific that we follow and make sure that we do not create wetland areas or areas attractive to certainly larger species of birds in particular.
So I think those are a bunch of city cons too, is the
Yeah,
takeover
lack
of maintenance.
Lack of airport knowledge.
Right, lack of airport knowledge, yeah. Maintenance of,
Well, FAA knowledge, you could just say.
right, there you go, FAA knowledge. Right. And a con is taking over all the maintenance, mowing streets. Yeah, and we have requirements for puddles. No puddles allowed, no duck puddles. Mhm. What else do we have? No latecomer agreements. What else from our port hat? Talked about septic system failure would require a hookup. But I don't think that's an issue because they can now. If somebody's septic system failed, we'd be able to hook them.
Or if they just want hookup, like squirrel,
Right.
brand new, yeah.
What about the water system? Talk much about that?
Theirs or ours?
Both. Are there any issues with hooking to water?
I think there are
There's
some
a whole
issues.
host of issues, yeah. One is the water testing requirements, which Ned's extremely familiar with as our water system manager. So we're a non-community, non-transient, whereas the city does not have that designation. That's part of why they have to do a lot more extensive water testing on a more frequent basis, as well as chlorinate, as we've already mentioned. Like I say, we have adequate fire flow to protect all the structures on port property that are sprinkled, as well as hydrants. But yeah, at some point, there will be a need for the port to have additional water, but that could be next year, that could be in 20 years, we don't know. Our water system and the city's regional system with their reservoir to the north that's on Public Works property have essentially the same pressure due to the height of the reservoirs. And so from a hydraulic standpoint, a connection would be pretty straightforward. But when you connect two separate water systems together, of course, that's considered a cross connection, and now it's one system. And I've had discussions in the past with folks from the city about the potential for an emergency connection, so that we could basically bring our two systems very close together but not physically connect them, but have a section of pipe that in the event of a natural disaster emergency or something, we could tie them together to fight a large fire or something like that. But yeah, there's
That's problems though.
yeah.
And once you hook those two systems together, then our system is chlorinated, whether we like it or not.
Right.
And you can't unchlorinate it.
That's true. So the water that we get at Johns Prairie is city water, and that, it's an interesting connection there. But basically, a city water main climbs up the hill to that reservoir. It climbs up the exterior of the reservoir. The pipe then penetrates near the roof, just below the roof. And then there's an air gap connection, so basically water can't flow backwards. Port water can't go into the city. And anytime you have chlorinated water that's dispersing through air, you're going to have a reduction of chlorination. So the city's required to maintain a minimum chlorine residual, they call it, in their water. And basically the residual is chlorine that's not chemically bound to other molecules that's available to basically kill pathogens and things. So they're required to maintain a particular residual, whereas our systems are not. We have, at Johns Prairie, our water, because we're getting it from the city, does have some chlorine in it. it's got less because of that air gap connection. And just because of the, you know, the size of our system and the, you know, because we're not injecting chlorine right there at the reservoir or downstream of it, certainly. Our residual chlorine levels are gonna be a lot lower than the city, even though we're getting our water from them. If that makes sense.
It's interesting stuff. Yeah, and one of the other, when we talked about motivation with them, you know, they also talked about increasing their availability of industrial land in order to try to attract more business, but I think that's a, you know, we added that it just increases their base. So I guess maybe it decreases the county's economic development base, maybe. What else?
I'm assuming Shelton is a first-class city,
It is, yeah.
okay,
What's that mean?
as opposed to second-class cities and towns. They're classified by,
It's based on basically having a harbor area, is my understanding. That's,
oh,
I know about that just from us owning the marina for a long time. What I don't know is if you could be, I assume you could be a first-class city without a harbor too, but I don't know that for sure. But I know it's related to that issue somehow.
I'm sure, well. And has the federal government ceded jurisdiction over our airport? Let's see, oh, no. Our airport is federally owned,
It's not federally owned, it used to be, it was,
but it has jurisdiction, not jurisdiction. If we sell any of that property, we have to give the money to the FAA.
90% of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just, it might be a con for the city to have federal land, jurisdiction over federal land.
I mean, the federal government definitely has jurisdictional control over this airport in a sense. As an example, so this property was acquired through the Surplus Property Act of 1957, which was essentially was a way to unload a bunch of property that the federal government had acquired for World War II. So, you know, after the State Patrol condemned the track, the training facility that used to be port property, the federal government opened our deed up and then added language that included what you just referred to, as well as some other information. So yeah, they can open our deed up and modify things as they wish.
But we're still the landowner.
Right.
The annexor.
Yeah, we own a
So,
fee simple, and
yeah.
you know, we're required to provide access to, you know, military for use of the airfield and things like that. You know, they call us up and request it, and we can't unreasonably deny it and things of that nature. It's all spelled out in the deed.
Right.
Right, and Brennan's correct, there's a very specific deed as to the restrictions for the property, that you do own a fee simple, but there are restrictions, not unusual, you know, for certain restrictions. And a first-class city, I think, is anything over 10,000 people. Less than that is a second-class city, and then towns are 1,500 or less. So it's also determined by population. It's not driven necessarily by a harbor. And then just first-class, second-class cities, towns have different authorities under statutes.
Right, okay. What about sales tax? Was another one too for stuff that you sell. I don't know the difference of the rate between the city and the county.
There is a difference.
Yeah,
There is a
We're at
difference.
8.5.
We're at 8.5, the city's 8.8.
8.8, yeah, that's what I was thinking, okay. So that's a tenant, city, county, pros and cons, yeah.
So that'd be a con to the port and tenants.
Yeah.
We're 8.5?
Yeah.
Okay. And the city gets it. And
How
the
big of an
county
impact
loses
is
it.
that? How big of an impact
Right,
is that?
yeah.
What do we sell?
Right, Yeah, what
We
do
don't
you-
have any.
What do I
any
hear our
commercial-
tenants sell though?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all of our construction projects include sales tax
Sales
as an
tax. Okay.
example, so
Yeah.
it would
Thank you.
definitely spread.
And we're looking
Okay.
at some big construction money coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all that stuff would change. You got it on
Okay.
all the right ones?
I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it looks like it to me. What else are we forgetting?
Commissioner Taylor,
Yeah.
would it be allowable to open, not the discussion, but questions from the,
No, we're not opening it to the public at all.
Yeah.
at this point.
okay.
It's between us.
Okay.
We will have a meeting where that will be available, but not today.
Mhm. Yeah, oh, and I talked with Wendy about, future things that I think we should do is, I'd love to have her sit with, 5 of our tenants, big and small, and just talk
Yeah,
through
amen.
the B&O tax and the sales tax question with them specifically. I don't need to know the
And what
specifics,
their
but,
fears
yeah,
are.
but what I'd love to have her, come back and say is, it's going to affect them, monetarily,
Yeah,
Well,
a
yeah,
percentage or
yeah.
a, whatever number that they think it will be different. And so, yeah, because we definitely want their weigh in for
That's
sure
right, yeah, I mean,
on what it's gonna affect
Yeah,
them,
that's-
bottom line, because that's what really matters.
that's what counts.
That's what really matters, is the tenants and how their
And
fees would change.
bringing new tenants in, when people call and ask questions, you can talk about foreign trade zones and different perks, but if you're, are you in the city and so you're, have to pay B&O tax or,
Mhm.
there's different, so I mean, it's, talking about if the talk of this is to drive economic development, are we? Or are we arguing the opposite,
How will that
that, well,
change?
your sales tax is gonna be a little higher because you're in the city versus the county? I mean,
Right.
just a question.
I think that foreign trade zone is probably a pro and con for the city. The city would gain a foreign trade zone and the county would lose one.
I think
Yeah, but
they're
what does
still
that
in the
mean?
I don't know.
area. Yeah, I think they're still in the area. I mean, it's just more or less, that has nothing to do with, except the area is designated. So you can, people can be in that designation,
Yeah.
a company, and it all comes through the feds. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But is that a pro or con to the city and the county to have one or not? have
No,
one?
because
Okay.
I think they both fall under the current,
Okay.
we're under,
We're under-
Port of Olympia's,
Yeah, pretty much.
they're both under it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we worked through all my thoughts, and this is really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think the
To
bottom
see.
line, one of the things that we have to consider is we've got to have a meeting, we, the port, not necessarily with the commissioners, but port officials, with our tenants and find out their views and delineate
Mm-hmm.
their views so that we can have something to work from.
Right.
Because right now, we're just assuming that
Yeah.
this is how they feel. We don't know.
Right.
We haven't
No.
asked them.
Right,
Yeah,
definitely want to ask
specifically,
them.
And we need to do that.
yeah.
Mhm. For sure. Okay.
Well, then is there something that we're not thinking of here? I mean, is there something that we're missing? So, I mean, the question comes to, there's people in the world that do this for a living, they facilitate this kind of meeting, and I'm sure annexations occur all the time, good, bad, and different. Would it be helpful future to have that kind of discussion where it's with someone who, MRSC, someone who's, involved in this kind
Right.
of,
There's done 10 of them, yeah,
Yeah.
right. A discussion with that would be helpful.
so,
Yeah.
something to think
Yeah,
about.
you were gonna talk to other ports too. I think we're
Yeah,
gonna put
try
that
to
on the to-do
find,
list.
yeah, it's hard to.
To see if anybody
Because I
has.
think it's hard to find any that have gone through it.
Oh,
There's
okay.
a lot of ports in cities, there's a lot of
Mhm.
ports in counties.
Mhm.
Someone going through it currently, so.
Right, or had in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting to know,
Yep,
right? Maybe the FA, or the WPPA could do
Yeah,
a
yeah.
shootout email to all the executive directors and say,
Yep.
does anybody have annexation experience that
Yep.
you could share with the Port of Shelton? I think that would be helpful too.
I agree.
Yeah.
One of the things that concerns me is the entire question of who decides how, or who decides the annexation. We 3 commissioners have the ultimate say. But what about our taxpayers, our ratepayers? We need to know what they think
Exactly.
about it.
constituents.
Because I don't want to take it, I don't want to make a decision for somebody that's completely off the wall. I mean, maybe there's some very good reasons
Yeah.
that they have for doing this. I just don't know.
Right.
And I don't want this commission to be, I don't want to say stuck, but I don't think it's
Blindsided.
blind, yeah, whatever, so we need to know what our people want, what our
And what we're
constituents
missing.
want. And frankly, our port district has more constituents in it than the city does.
Mhm.
So, where are we?
interesting
Who's
to
the senior
think about.
district
Yeah.
and who's not?
Yeah, I think the taxpayers, voters are right up there with tenants.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we need to do that.
We answer to both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe, maybe that's on our question thing is, let's hear from constituents as well as tenants. It's a public meeting.
And maybe they don't have an opinion, I don't know. We don't know, how
Right.
things are politically, you don't know.
Yeah,
You know, they
So
cared
you ask
about
the
the
question.
regional
Yeah.
airport.
Well, just like we did with the airport, the marina.
Yeah, it's
We
no
had those
different than
public
the
things, come
marina.
tell us, talk to us.
And we didn't get a huge, yeah, we did that. And again, that wasn't a huge response that we got.
It was pretty good.
It was pretty good,
Yeah.
but I would have thought it would have been more. but-
Did you? Oh,
Yeah, I did.
I would have thought it would have been really
Yeah.
only the people who were directly affected
Right.
by that change.
Showed up, yeah,
Right.
nobody else
Change,
did,
yeah.
yeah, just the yacht guys.
And that's true.
Showed up.
I mean, that's, I think that happens everywhere.
So, anyway.
Unfortunately.
And that's
Yeah, that's
kind
the way
of
it
the.
But the opportunity is still, we still gotta give the opportunity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So, public hearings, yep, that kind of stuff,
yeah,
we'll definitely
we're
hear.
gonna have to do that, open the process. I
Yep.
suppose.
Yep.
I guess we could put that on, I don't know where we would put that, open the process of how we,
Yeah, we'll do.
Something similar, probably with Marina,
Okay.
have meetings, random varied times that people can show
Yeah,
up.
come and
if
talk
they're not,
and- yeah.
Working and then sit down with specific,
Mhm.
with tenants maybe.
Mhm.
So this issue maybe wouldn't have come up, but the city brought it up. So that's the other
Right.
side of this
Right.
is you're addressing something that somebody else is asking for.
Mhm.
Is that, so the question is, do you go down this path or do you
Right.
just simply say, I think it's a good idea,
Right.
without that knowledge,
Not
you probably
interested,
don't
yeah.
say that yet, but, that's the question, usually it seems like in an annexation like Peacock Ridge, those developers wanted
They came
to
to-
be annexed, so
yeah,
they
yes.
asked to be annexed. We've never gone and asked to be annexed.
Right,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I agree with that.
But, yeah, I think we still have to get a little bit more information before we say that, throw that out there,
Mhm.
about not interested. Okay?
Yeah. In looking at our agenda, we need to make a correction right now.
Oh,
The agenda says we start at 2:00.
Oops, it does say
So does
that.
that make this invalid?
uh-oh, my agenda didn't,
Let me check, see what
my
your
notice didn't, I don't think, it said 10.
No, your
is-
notice to the public and to all those who requested notices said
10
March
o'clock.
3 at 10 a.m.
10 a.m.,
So that's
good.
a scrivener's
That's why they're
error.
here.
which is why they showed up.
Does not make any
Right.
sense, you've done
Right.
invalid, you've not held a public meeting in violation of the Open Meeting Act. You're off the hook, Mr. Chairman.
Good deal.
We live
Or
in
Wendy
fear.
Smith, one of the two was on it. Sorry about that, at least you made.
Just a typo on the agenda that was for purposes only here. That is just a guideline to follow. And that agenda wasn't adopted at that time, so you're okay.
Yeah, we
That's
never
true,
did
we
adopt
didn't
the
adopt the
agenda.
You
agenda.
didn't. This is a special meeting,
So
and
we-
therefore the
we do
special
what we
meeting, you don't
want.
have to take public comment. And as you know, the special meeting, you can only address the agenda item that's on the agenda.
Yep.
So there's no
And
need
can
to
take no
adopt it.
action except for any items on that special agenda.
We have one other item to talk about. The land exchange.
So, this, you guys heard it 2 Fridays ago or whatever that was. But Jeff came to Brandon and I previous to that, talking about the similar expansion of their sewer treatment facility for future closing down in 20-plus years or whatever of the downtown facility. Would the port entertain selling the land adjacent. In our discussion, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but the conversation was 5 acres at the most.
Of port property, right?
And at the discussion you had, it was 25 acres, so that amount jumped up pretty greatly.
But
I
in
don't-
exchange, we were only gonna get, what, 4 acres? What's the,
No.
The original conversation, it was the reverse of what was printed in the paper, and I wasn't at the meeting that you
Okay.
folks were at, but what Jeff Knighton had said to us was, you know, they have 25 or more acres, it might even be 40, I don't remember the number, but that the city doesn't really have a use for. And that was the same property where they had been proposing putting in 400 homes that we were not in favor of due to the proximity to the airport. So yeah, he indicated they would like to acquire fee simple, if possible, 4 to 5 acres of port property adjacent to the sewer treatment plant that's just south of us.
Okay.
And then they would be willing to do some, you know, a land swap or similar transaction where we would acquire far more acreage than that, up, 25, I think is the number I recall, but yeah.
So maybe I misheard that, maybe he wasn't, but I thought we were talking about the property here, and I don't, correct me if you guys heard something different, but I said, and how much property, or he said we were looking at about 25 acres, which
Yeah.
takes up a pretty good, yeah.
That's what I heard too, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Thought that
So,
went from
yeah,
5 to
and that was
25 and
never-
admitted. Yeah.
Not to mention, again, going to the FAA, asking if they would approve of a sale of this property.
And it's
And is it
even
in
more
our-
complicated than that, actually, because because of that deed that exists, we would have to formally ask the FAA for a release on the property. So we went through that process east of US 101 when we granted an easement to Mr. Sam Sy, who owns, formerly it was 40 acres just north of Walmart there. We acquired 8.3 acres of his property because it was our future runway protection zone, which is basically unusable marshland, wetland there. And we granted an easement off of Shelton Springs Road across our property to his 40 acre formerly 40 acre parcel.
yeah, we did that.
I remember that, yeah.
So, but that was fairly streamlined to go through because all we were granting was an easement for the
easement.
purpose of ingress, egress, and potentially utilities to that site.
Right.
Whereas this would be a fee simple, and at least that's what they're
Deeding
proposing.
over.
Yeah, deeding over, and this FAA may not agree to that. I mean, that's,
And it may
An
take them
unknown.
3 years.
yeah.
How did the city get that little chunk, that little corner anyway, do you know?
They purchased it, I'm not sure who the seller was there, it wasn't the port.
It's odd that it's right there.
And what's interesting too is on our airport layout plan, it actually shows that the port should acquire from the city a small triangle of that property, kind of on the east side of their plan. So, yeah, our document says we should be acquiring their land and they would like to acquire ours. It's like the
Well,
same area.
and the argument for the other property, if you recall, in developing that, they hadn't come to us with any kind of, it just was going forward in their process, and we, DOT Aviation, and we wrote a letter saying, wait a second, you're in our zone, you're in the airport zone. And that's their requirement that they, that they've adopted, that they check our zones. I remember immediately getting a call after we sent that letter from a council member saying, tell me about this, what did we miss,
Yeah.
And so to protect that property, it's already protected. It's already in their own plan, saying it's protected if it falls in our zone for only, these certain building requirements, and residential is not one of them. And it's not the entire
I
property.
mean,
it's at
that
least-
property could be developed for residential, but not at the
Density
density that they
talking
were
Yeah.
out for.
Right, right.
So swapping some of this land for that, to me, I don't know that that's property that is fitting for our future planning.
Right.
But if it is, I don't think the idea to gain that property is so we can keep a handle on who's developing our properties.
Right.
They have
It's
to
already
abide by
there.
their rules.
They have to abide by that rule
that they've
already.
adopted.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Do we know how much land they actually need to support that sewer plant?
Somewhere between 4 and 25 acres.
Yeah, I mean, he
Thank you,
said,
Brandon.
you know, and he said 5 was the max to Brandon and I.
Yeah.
And then you remember I asked the question, does it have to be right next to the
Yeah.
current facility? And the answer is no, that just is convenient.
And there's also vacant land immediately south. If you look at an aerial, you see what looks like a large gravel pit area. I think Hall Equities owns that. They could expand to the south and not even need port property. I'm not sure if they've looked into that or if they're opposed to that. I think I even mentioned it during our meeting with Jeff, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So you don't know if they've thought about that?
I don't know if they've looked into that or not. I mean, there could be environmental issues since that's in close proximity to Goose Lake.
Goose Lake.
Yeah, Goose Lake, right.
But what's better to
Beautiful
put
lake
there than a
properties.
wastewater treatment plant?
Right.
I also conveyed that, you know, that height of structures in that area is a significant issue. You know, due to the approach surfaces of the airport, the FAR Part 77 surfaces. And so that would limit their ability to, because they want to have large reservoirs for storage of, you know, treated wastewater.
But those wouldn't be a height issue.
They could be depending on, you know,
Oh, okay.
how they designed them.
Yeah.
We also attract birds.
I
Yeah,
just
we
gonna
also
say we
talked
don't
about
wanna do,
that.
yeah,
We talked
Yeah.
about
don't wanna do
birds.
anything that attracts birds to the area.
And I don't think they're proposing, you know, open ponds and things
Okay.
like that, but I don't know. Their preliminary plan didn't seem to indicate that, but.
Right.
So I guess the question, we need to know more about what
Right.
the.
Yeah, I'm not inclined
land
to
specifics.
accept a trade of 4 for 25.
No, I don't think any of us are. But we're not gonna make that decision.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just saying that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, so we need to get some clarification
Needs
on,
more information.
on really what they want.
Specifically,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it did change.
And then we can have a discussion as to
Yeah.
where we go with
Yeah.
it. And I note your exception to trade, the trade imbalance or whatever.
Right.
And I don't
Or even just,
think
yeah.
he said we'd only give, that was in the
Yeah.
paper, but I don't think he said that. But the 25 number for our property was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
That was never indicated. Now,
So-
whether they've done further studies and determined they actually need 25,
You're right.
that was
How that
not the
changed.
conversation we had.
No. Interesting.
Okay.
Another thing too is that our current airport master plan and airport layout plan, which is a component of that, shows that the former fairgrounds access roads should be removed and a new access road should be constructed south, along our south property line there. If that were to happen, you know, from the highway to get to that future aviation development that we are planning, you'd be basically driving right through the middle of a sewer treatment plant. Just
The
another-
expanded sewer treatment plant.
Yeah, an expanded sewer treatment plant.
I think we talked to Jeff about that too.
Yeah.
So.
That seems not so desirable.
Well, how big is that former fairgrounds piece, Brandon?
It's about 67 acres, but much of that is not developable in terms of buildings due to height restrictions and things like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Then you take away
That's right.
25 more.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not-
developable, it's probably more like 30 or 40 acres, I'm guessing,
Mm.
depending on what you're trying to do.
Right, because it goes a little bit uphill, doesn't it? You have height issues, yeah. Mm.
Great view.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So a lot of the former fairgrounds buildings were located within the building restriction line of the
Mm.
runway. And so I think it's a BRL 30, or meaning you can't have a structure over 30 feet in that, within that zone.
Mm-mm.
Also, the fences that are along those entrance roads would need to be removed. They're also too close to the runway and they're a penetration of those surfaces. So, you know, our next project, as we all know, is gonna be paving the taxiways and lighting them up and putting in new lighted signage. Immediately after that, we're gonna start a whole new airport master plan update, which is a big project. The last time we did it, we started it, I think in 2008 or so, and it took until 2013 to get that finally adopted. But that was mostly because of the litigation we were in at the time for the rezone
Right.
of property
Yeah.
south of the runway. So this time around, we're anticipating it'll be about a 2-year process.
Okay.
It'll be a very open, transparent, public process. We're certainly going to be seeking a lot of input from the community and our aviators and users of the airfield and things like that.
Cool.
And so a component of that airport master plan update will be to kind of come up with a conceptual design of what the redevelopment of the former fairgrounds will look like. And then we also have the bipartisan infrastructure law money, which is $159,000 a year that we're getting from the federal government for 5 years. And so some of that money we intend to put towards prelim design, environmental review, eventually final design, and then construction of a taxiway that gets us from the runway south to that area to facilitate aviation development down there.
Cool.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Or to the sewer treatment plant, whichever you want.
Okay, commissioners, do you have anything else you
I
want to?
don't, yeah, I appreciate letting
More
me-
questions than answers?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, more
Okay,
questions.
so what are
than
the
answers.
takeaways from this meeting that we're going to have?
Right.
More questions than answers.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could take pictures of all of our
yeah.
Yeah.
questions, and I don't know how we capture that.
I can type them and send them to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that'd be
and
awesome.
then we'll look at that, and we, obviously, we're gonna have to have some meetings, we're gonna have to have some
Yep, yeah, public meeting stuff.
public meetings, and discussions, and we can schedule that. We'll have to have a meeting where we can make some decisions,
Mhm,
and we'll do that at a proper open
mhm,
meeting.
mhm.
With that then, unless there's anything else,
Are we prepared to schedule a public meeting at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Let's let Wendy get her stuff together and we can go forward.
Get your act together.
20 minutes.
In 20 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, unless there's anything else?
I'm good.
We're-
Appreciate it.
Thank you all
You're
for
on
attending.
Tuesday.
Thank you so
Yep.
much.